All right, hello and welcome back, everybody. This is David with Fairmere's Rangers. I just wanted to give a quick look at the previous week that we just finished up and a look ahead to what we're going to be facing for our tournament, for our Nations versus Nations tournament. So let's go ahead and take a dive back into what happened last week. Last week, we had Spain and France face off. That was a really excellent matchup. Spain taking that one, and that was two undefeated teams. So that was for the top of the division, and you can see that bumped France all the way down to 1-1. They came in with a record of 1-0. Spain with a record of 2-0. So it bumped France all the way down to the middle of the division. But it's not like they can't creep back up with a win next week. They could end up being level with the middle tier, or if Spain was to get a loss, that would even up their record. Of course, Spain having the tiebreaker because they, of course, won that matchup. But it doesn't put France completely out of it. And then we, of course, had the matchup of United Provinces versus the Cherokee. And the United Provinces taking that and just absolutely smashing the I was almost going to say a curse word. I'm trying to keep myself from doing that, but they smashed the ever-living guts out of the Cherokee, the Plains, and the Pueblo, and gave them their second loss of the year, and elevating the United Provinces to a record of 2-1. And their previous matchup, they lost against the Hurons. So that was important for them. They finally get a win versus one of the native factions. And that brings the standings to both of them actually, the Huron, not the Cherokee, but they're actually elevated to the same record as the Huron. But of course, the Huron are going to have that tiebreaker right here because they did beat the United Provinces. So that's why they're ahead of United Provinces. But keep an eye on United Provinces. I think they're a nation to keep an eye on as this tournament progresses. And, of course, the Huron getting an absolutely great win against the United States. And the Huron looking really good. Their only loss coming against the top seed Spain in week 1. So Huron looking pretty good in Group A division. Now in Group B, we had a really good matchup with Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. And Poland, Lithuania just squeaked out a victory in that one versus Russia. If you remember that one lasted way into it. It probably could have ended a little bit quicker, and Poland, Lithuania kind of creeped a little closer. So I think, Russia creeped a little bit closer to Poland, Lithuania. But Poland, Lithuania really had it under control pretty early on. But that score, bringing that closer, could help in tiebreakers later on. We'll have to wait and see how the next matchup goes for Russia and Poland, Lithuania. But that could be something to watch out for. That's why you got to have that killer instinct when you're playing somebody. You really got to put them under the knife and really cut the throat, if you will. In the other one, it was Prussia versus Maratha Confederacy. And in that one, Maratha Confederacy takes the win versus Prussia. And that one actually is pretty tight if you look at the scores. And, man, I mean, Maratha Confederacy coming off of a loss last week against Poland, Lithuania. And that kind of surprised me with that win. And you can see here Maratha with a 2-1 record. They even up with Poland, Lithuania. Poland, Lithuania does have a tiebreaker against them because they did beat Maratha. So that's why they're seated ahead of Maratha. Of course, Austria is the number 1 seed with 2-0. And then you got Prussia, who we were talking about previously. They lost to Maratha. And they are at a record of 1-2. And they do have a tiebreaker over the Ottomans. Because they did defeat the Ottomans, so that's why they're seated ahead of them. Now, obviously, the last matchup was Austria versus the Ottoman Empire, and Austria really dominated in that matchup. Man, Austria really took it to the Ottomans and just I mean, I was shocked because it was played on the Ottoman home turf of Syrian Ridge, and I thought the Austrians would really struggle on that. But, I mean, they really came out and just utterly destroyed the Ottomans. So, really, really well done for Austria to keep the winning record as the perfect winning record in the division, the only one. So that's where we kind of stand from the previous week. Now let's kind of look at the matchups that are going to be happening this week in round 4. So round 4, we got the Cherokee and the Pueblo and Plains versus United States. So these are going to be the Cherokee of 1-2 versus United States of 0-2. So can the United States get their first win of the season? That's a good question, because United States, who have they lost to? They lost to the Huron. So just last week, they lost to the Huron, and they also lost to United Provinces. But, I mean, they got smashed by the natives last week. So can they rebound against another native faction? That will be interesting to see how that turns out. Whereas the Cherokee, they have fought all 3 of the European factions and come out with actually, not looking that good, except for the first matchup that they had. They came out with the record of 1-0 against Great Britain, but then since then they got beat by Spain and United Provinces. So we'll see if Cherokee can right the ship, or if it will be the United States getting their first win. Then we got France, who is coming in off of a loss from Spain with a record of 1-1. And they are going to be facing off against the United Provinces. So this is going to be a heck of a matchup, because both of these teams should be really solid. So I'm really interested to see how this one turns out, because United Provinces has played pretty dang well in every single matchup. Even their loss against the Huron, they fought to the bitter end and played pretty well in that matchup. So we'll see how that one turns out. Then the last matchup is Great Britain versus Spain. Now, interesting, because Great Britain just has not had the luck this season. They've fought the first 2 rounds and lost both to the Cherokee and Plains and Pueblo, and then they lost again to France the next round. And they had their bye week in round 3. And now they're facing off against Spain, who has come off of an absolute tear, winning all 3 of their matchups against the Huron, the Cherokee, and then against France. So, I mean, they've gone up against some good teams. So we'll see if Spain can keep the ball rolling and remain as the only undefeated team. And as a matter of fact, in both divisions, they're the only team that has 3 wins at this point in the season. So can they keep that ball rolling and get another win against Great Britain? And will Great Britain right the ship and get their first win of the season and try to get to 1-2? I mean, it will make a big difference that they can do that. I mean, honestly, if they go to 0-3, it might be over for Great Britain. I'm not saying that they can't possibly make the playoffs, but man, you gotta really pull it together here and get a streak going. Great Britain. I mean, anything can happen, but my goodness, they've got to start showing some progress here. Great Britain, in their matchup against France, they got absolutely crushed. I mean, absolutely crushed. You'd think they'd play better against France than that, but they got absolutely just demolished. And versus the Cherokee, Plains, and Pueblo, they actually played pretty solid against them. They came pretty close. But they did just lose to the Cherokee, and that gave the Cherokee their only win. So who knows? Does that say something negative to them? Well, are the Cherokee better than what we think? I don't know. Right now they're sitting at a 1-2 record. So they're in the bottom 3 of the division. So we'll have to see if they can, either one of these teams can get better. But, yeah, Spain is dominating so far. So it'll be interesting to see, like I said, if they can keep that going. A lot of interesting matchups. I'm really curious to see how this goes down. I hope you're ready for a really good, solid round coming up, and get ready to look for those matches coming soon. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you on the next one.